It's good to be with you tonight. Of course, it's good to be anywhere at this point, because I shouldn't be here as far as that's concerned. But I am, and we're going to do this in two parts. As Rick said, this first part is going to be just kind of a general timeline of the events that happened, what all transpired during that time up to the point of my death, and them restoring me and bringing me back. Then we'll end that recording. That one will be uploaded. This second part is really going to tie in with a lot of things that Rick was talking about this season, and it's going to be a little bit more personal, a little more transparent, a little more raw. And so that one will not be uploaded to YouTube, but we are going to record it just to have a record of it. So anyway, I'm going to start off with November the 3rd, the Sunday that we were scheduled to have an in-person meeting at Gabe's house. And if you remember, that's when all the storms were firing off. People, that everybody was concerned about travel. There were, tornado warnings going off and all of that. And so the decision was made to cancel the in-person meeting. And so we switched to a Zoom meeting, which I hosted that evening. And during the day, I started to feel really bad. My chest and upper abdominal area was in a lot of pain. And so kind of barely made it through the Zoom meeting. And after we ended that meeting, I told Olga, I said, I'm going to bed. I'm hurting too much. I'm not going to eat. I'm just in too much pain. So I went and tried to get comfortable in bed, tried to get a little sleep, really couldn't. And then around about 2 o'clock Monday morning, I knew things were getting worse. And I, had this kind of a situation back in July of the last year. And so I put it off for 4 or 5 days before I went to the hospital back then. And this time I knew we were heading in a bad direction. So I just told Olga, I said, yeah, you need to take me to the ER. And that's probably the second time those words have ever come out of my mouth, because I just don't go to the ER. It's been up until these last few years, I've hardly ever went to a doctor. But anyway, we went to the emergency room here at Norman Regional. They did a CT scan, did blood tests, got some lab work back. A lot of things showing up in my blood were showing issues with pancreatitis, liver function. The CT scan showed a lot of fluid in my abdomen and my belly area. I have what is called a duodenal mass, or a mass in my duodenum, which is the area between the stomach and the intestines, where the liver and the pancreas and various different things kind of feed in to break down the food before it goes into the intestines. So, and I've had to deal with that before. But the decision was made by the people at OU, and I agreed to it, to transfer me to from Norman Regional to OU Medical Center in Oklahoma City. And so it's around about 6 o'clock at this point. And so the ambulance is getting ready to transport me to OU Medical. There's still a lot of storms firing off in that area up in there. Olga was going to follow me, and I told her, no, it's too dangerous. Just go back home, get some rest, because she'd been up all night with me. And they had me on, a lot of different things to kind of help deal with the pain. I said, just, go back to the apartment. I'll let you know whenever I get into a room. We'll deal with it later. I don't want you having an accident. And then both of us are in the hospital. And both of us have a little bit of problem driving in the dark now. Our eyesight is not as good as it once was, and so it was still dark and overcast, even though it was early morning hours. So Olga finally agreed to do that, and so they loaded me up in the ambulance. And as we were about to take off, one of the EMTs said, "Well, they just issued a code black, which because of the weather, which mainly was don't get out in this, shelter in place until this passes through." And I heard the driver say, "Well, we're going anyway." So off we went to Oklahoma City to the OU Medical Center. And then some strange things started happening to me when I was in the ambulance. I it was like I was in an echo chamber, and I know I was in an ambulance, but it was something beyond that. And when the thunder would crash, it was just like it would reverberate again and again. And I started having these flashes of some cosmic warfare. And even when I would kind of drift off into sleep, I would be startled awake by these flashes of this cosmic warfare that was going on. And you could say was hallucinating or whatever, but I don't think so. And the creatures that were at at war, uh, I I really couldn't describe them. I mean, some of them were like dragon-like, and they were black with red markings. And I haven't shared this with a whole lot of people because it sounds rather crazy. Uh, and there was, you know, another figure that looked like King Kong. You know, it was just like monstrous entities, and there was just this reverberating warfare that was going on. And this continued on for the not only the ambulance ride, but even after I was at OU Medical Center. Um, that I would just be jolted awake by these images of this warfare that was going on. And I believe there truly was a warfare going on in the heavenlies, not just regarding me, but regarding uh, things in the nation. I think there was just a warfare that was going on during that time in the run up to the election. Uh, and I was just getting a glimpse of that. So um, we get up to OU Medical. I'm still being awakened by these visions. I'm in the triage area for quite some time. Probably the first report that they filed on me up there at OU Medical was around 7:15 or so. And so at this point, they're just basically trying to uh, process the information that they're getting from Norman Regional. I really haven't had any tests or anything going on at this point. And then finally, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday, they finally get me into a room. And then Olga had been texting me, and of course, I'd been in and out. So I finally saw one of her texts that said, "Do you want me to come up there?" And so I texted her and said, "Don't worry about it. I'm still in and out. There's no point in you coming up here. It was already getting late in the afternoon." And again, I didn't want her out driving in OKC traffic, as it was getting dark. So I said, just stay there. That way she could go vote the next day, and then she could come on up later. So she agreed to that. So we move on, and this is about 4 o'clock or so the next morning, Tuesday morning. And of course, I'm still having these flashes. And they had, because I'm hooked up to so many wires, they put in this bedside commode. And so I, had to use that. And I got back in bed. And when I did, I could tell things were going south quickly. And I had shortness of breath. I couldn't catch my breath. the pain was, you know, unbelievable. And I started pressing the nurse's call button, and nobody was answering. And so I started pressing every button on there, trying to get somebody's attention. I could hear people out walking by in the hallway, and I'd try to say, "Help, help, I can't breathe, I can't breathe," and nothing, I just couldn't, I didn't have enough ability to yell or say anything very loudly. And then there came a point that I was laying there on the bed. And I knew I was going to die. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind. I knew this was the end, and I had about maybe 20, 25 seconds before that happened. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I didn't see myself going out like this. If I'd had more time to think about it, I'd be thinking, I can't wait until Rick gets to heaven because I'm going to slap him around because he says I'm going to live a long life, and here I am dying on this bed alone. My family's not even going to find out about it for several hours because they didn't come to find out later on. The OU Medical didn't have the right emergency contact information. So nobody was even aware that I was having a cardiac arrest. And so anyway, but there was this white light, and to call it a light is not, doesn't do it justice, because we think of a light as, we have a source and the light that comes out of it is the ray, and this wasn't that at all. It was just like this beautiful, perfect white light, no darkness. It wasn't even radiating anything out. It was just pure light, like in a liquid form, and it was coming towards me, and and I was totally at peace. There was no panic. It's just like, well, this is it. I'm about to head to the other side, and I was at peace with that. And so the light came, and I was just immersed in that light. And so that was it in my mind. Um, so anyway, the next thing I remember is I opened up my eyes, and I see this little cherub looking face that looked like my daughter Patience looking at me. And the first thought that went through my mind was, wow, they have angels in heaven that look like my daughter. That's cool. And then the angel said, hi, Dad, welcome back. And so that got really confusing. And I tried to say something, and she said, no, sorry, you can't talk. You have tubes running down your throat right now. And so that was even more confusing, that I was on, some form of life support, that a machine was doing the breathing for me. I tried to move my hands to, kind of see what's going on, and found that my hands were restrained to the bed. And she said, no, sorry, you can't move right now. They're afraid you might try to pull your tubes out. And so at this point, I'm really confused because I'm thinking I'm waking up in heaven, and now I'm beginning to wonder, maybe purgatory's real. I don't know. I'm not Catholic, but maybe this. I don't know. I'm just confused at this point. And something about it. It anyway. My daughter was trying to tell me that I had a cardiac arrest, and that when they found me, that it took them 4 minutes to get me back. And so whenever they did find me and I wasn't responsive, that's when the CPR began. And it, from what I hear, can be pretty brutal. Um, from Patience's point of view, she was working up in Oklahoma City, and she was just going to swing by for lunch. Um, and so she kept texting me, can I bring you anything, smoothie or whatever? And so anyway, the address that they gave, it turned out to be in the ICU area. And so she's heading to the room that I'm in. and she sees that I am in ICU. And so she goes up to the nurse and said, you know, what am I about to walk into here? I came up here to visit my dad, and is he here at ICU? And they said, yeah, he had a cardiac arrest, and told her the whole story. So that's whenever she came in, and she was the first person to finally hear that something had gone terribly wrong. And so anyway, Olga was coming up. She had voted, and she was coming up and was going to stay with me. And it was when she pulled into the parking lot, she saw the text, she heard text coming in, and she finally got parked and looked at one of the texts, and it was the one that went out to the church group that said that I was in ICU. And she said she just had this sinking feeling in her gut, that she had missed something. And so uh, she finally found patients, and they both went up there to the room. Um, Now, I don't want to go into a lot of the details of the road to recovery back, because I want to get to other things. All I can tell you is it was a long road. When you physically die, everything has to reboot. My brain had to reboot. I was trying to connect things. When I was finally able to use my phone, I had to stop and try to remember where apps were, how to use this, or what to do next. It was just the neurons were trying to regroup and trying to um, uh, refocus on just me being able to function again. My kidneys had to reboot; they weren't working. My digestive system had to reboot; it wasn't working. Uh, my lab work was all out of whack. Uh, all of a sudden, my sugar levels are out of control, and they're trying to level that out. And it was just one thing after another. And so there were numerous tests. I had, everything from an echocardiogram to numerous x-rays, trying to pinpoint different issues, to OU uh, medical teams credit. They they have a team of people, so it's everybody's involved. It's not just one doctor that's overseeing you, but there's several teams with doctors that are involved, and so everybody's kind of seeing how everything else is interacting, since there were so many complications. But uh, credit to my family. They were there in mass. I mean, we pretty well um, uh, filled the emergency room, which fortunately was a big emergency room. But they were there for us, and at one point they had, when my hands were still restrained, they had come up. Amari had come up with this keyboard so I could just point because I couldn't talk. And so that was kind of a trip. We all got a big laugh out of that. Uh, Olga and I spent our anniversary up there. I was out of ICU at that point and was in a step down unit. And my daughters all got together, and Mimi, Angelica, Patience, and Amari, our granddaughter, brought in this wonderful anniversary meal. Uh, it was awesome. The little fake candlelight things, and they'd gotten food from Charleston's and brought in a table, and with a tablecloth and everything. And I couldn't eat much, but it was awesome. It was just really sweet of them to go the extra mile to do that, to make our anniversary special. Is probably the most special anniversary that we've ever had. but they were there for support um, in a lot of different ways, and I'll get into some of that in part two as well. Um, uh, I'm going to kind of end this part because, the $1 million question that everybody has, did you see Jesus? Did you see God? And in the sense of, the image that we all have of Jesus and walking down, you know, the golden pathways of heaven and having these long conversations. Sorry, if that happened, I have no recollection of it. In the sense that God is light and in him there is no darkness, yeah, I had an experience with Jesus. I had an experience with God, and I was immersed in that experience, and I was at peace with it. And it was it was awesome. Um, so somebody had asked me. In fact, Johnny, I think he's probably on here, and so I said, "Have you been able to pull some things together and kind of piece all of this together?" And I said, "Well, yeah, somewhat." And he said, "Care to share any of it?" And I said, "God had to stop my heart to get my undivided attention. And that just kind of shows my hard headedness, I guess. But there's no doubt in my mind the enemy wasn't trying to steal my life. He wasn't trying to kill me. He wasn't trying to take me out. My life had to change. And God had to stop my heart to do it, to get my attention. Everything before that moment, that's all in the past. Everything ahead of me. I know it's the last act in the drama of my life, and we're in scene one, and I don't know how many scenes this last act is, but I know it's different. I know there are a lot of things that I've had to come to grips with, which I'm going to cover in part two. So anyway, that's kind of a sharing of. I was in the hospital for about 14 days. I've had to go through physical therapy to learn how to really, walk again. Um, uh, it's been a journey, but I'm going to end this part right here, and then we'll get to part two.